Reno Tirakatari. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe. Ka titi hei wā mauri ora ki te whai au ki te ao mārama. E ngā hapu o Maungaharuru-Tangitu. Tēnā koutou. Ngāti kuru mokihi. Ngai tātara. Ngāti māranga tū he taua. Ngai te ruruku ki tangoio. Me era atu hapu. Nau mai, hara mai ki te whare pāramata e takatū nei. Hara mai nunui mā teitei mā. Nau mai, piki mai ki te whare pāramata. Nō koutou tēnei rā. Ko tēnei, ko te rā whakahirahira, ki te whakatutuku i ngā wawata o rātou mā. Āpiti hono, tātai hono, ko te honga mate ki te honga mate. Āpiti hono, tātai hono, ko te honga ora ki te honga ora. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to speak at this first reading in support of the Maungaharuru-Tangitu Claim Settlement Bill. Sir, the Hapu of this area had an area of influence around the central Hawke's Bay. That is to say, from the outskirts of the north of Napier towards Tangoio and then east towards the Maungaharuru Ranges. Many people will know this area when they drive from Napier to Taupo. It's that area that takes in the beautiful Esk Valley with its nicely appointed old church in amongst neat and tidy rows of grapes. Mr. Speaker, the Crown acknowledges the length of time it took to negotiate with the Hapu of Maungaharuru-Tangitu. When the Crown bought the Ahuriri block, it failed to consult the Hapu of Maungaharuru-Tangitu. The Crown once again managed to hoodwink the tangata whenua into accepting unfair prices for land, knowing full well that Māori had no final option but to alienate their land. And that's the sorry story, sir, which is recounted through practically every settlement bill that goes through this House. The whānau at Tangoio and Mohaka were led to believe that they would benefit from Pākehā settlement. Unfortunately, for those whānau and Hapu, Pākehā settlements were confined to Napier, and so those places and people were unable to benefit. This led them into economic depression, and they were forced, like so many Hapu throughout New Zealand, to alienate their land to help pay off debts incurred due to Crown promises of benefits from Pākehā settlement not being kept. Mr. Speaker, part of the history of these Hapu also lies with the story of Te Koti and his followers. Some members of this collective suffered the atrocity of the summary execution of innocent Māori labelled rebels, which occurred at Ngātapa and became known as the Ngātapa incident. And sir, it always makes me feel uncomfortable the way history minimalises in some ways the early colonial atrocities by calling them mere incidents. It's like the way the British called their war with the Catholics of Northern Ireland the Troubles. It's like nothing more than your car running out of petrol, and so it put you in a spot of trouble. But sir, it was not a big deal. But we know that these incidents are more than just that. We're covering Te Tauihu settlement bill. There was more than an incident at Waido, just like there was more than an incident at Ngātapa. Just like the wars over in Northern Ireland were more than just trouble. Real people were killed, slaughtered and murdered. It's these parts of our history that has caused so much sufferance to the collective of Maungaharuru-Tangitu. The Crown will take responsibility and apologise to the iwi and hapu of this bill and acknowledge it failed in its duty to uphold the mana of the Treaty o Waitangi. Much of the area lost to these people is today rich, fertile land that grows the fruit and grapes that brings in hundreds of millions of dollars every year into the Hawke's Bay region. That's the sort of economic legacy these hapu have missed out on. Every day, the descendants of the original claimants drive past the expensive wineries and orchards north of Napier and see what may have been had they not been alienated from their land. I'm sure somewhere amongst the smoking embers of Anglo-Māori relationships in Hawke's Bay, of the 1860s, we will find the torch of Sir Donald Maclean, this country's first Minister of Native Lands, an inventor of that taniwha, at that time the Native Land Court. Maclean's legacy in Napier was at the expense of these hapu and iwi, who lost so much through land alienations and the actions of the Native Land Court. The Crown will apologise for the attacks against the people of Petane and Omarunui in 1866. And as you might recall, since I've been doing these calls on settlement bills, I like to use a constant saying that to understand whakapapa is to understand Māori history. And unfortunately, some of the whānau's genetic code was completely erased from the whakapapa of these tribes. Such depredations were catastrophic to the well-being of whānau, hapu and iwi. And for this, the Crown will also apologise. And so, sir, as my colleague and speeches have mentioned before, there were certain elements of commercial redress and protocols and cultural redress that have been incorporated into these bills, as they are in most settlements, and we are here to tautoko all of those measures. And I do acknowledge the work and the team, the negotiating team that were instrumental in getting us to this point. And I too would like to acknowledge Bevan Taylor and Tania Hopmans, a name that's familiar to me. I used to look up to her as a corporate lawyer back in the day. She was a few years ahead of me, but she led the way. And likewise, many other familiar names that I see in the negotiating team. Tom Manina, another name. We did a bit of work together back in the day with Māori businesses. So I'd just like to acknowledge them all. I'd like to acknowledge all the kaumātua and kuia that have come down, bus. Probably they rose early this morning to make it here on this on the trip down, and I'd like to thank them all for coming here, because this is a special day for this hapu and this whānau group here. I too have special memories of Tāngoio Marae. Growing up, I acknowledge the reti whānau, a potoro Joe Reti and Hine, and I spent a few trips going through there, having whakamoemiti, playing in the Reo Brass Band, and fellowshipping with the whānau there at Tāngoia. So I'd like to acknowledge all the mōrehu there. So I'm not outdone by my mihingare offside of there in Shane, but I'd like to acknowledge the reti whānau as well, and Fred now, who's following in his dad's footsteps as a potoro, for all his sterling work behind the scenes as well. So yes, it's very important, I guess, that we acknowledge the work that has gone on, and also those that have passed on, and also how significant these bills are in terms of documenting the history of these hapu, and making sure that we are taking a step in the right direction, charting a new future for them. And I'm looking forward to working in Select Committee under my whanaunga there, Tau, our sterling crew in the Māori Affairs Committee, as we awhi and hear submissions on this bill. But I'd just like to acknowledge the whānau once again who have travelled here today, and I really tautoko this bill and I commend it to the House. Kia ora tātou.
I call the honourable member